My name is Grace. I'm 24 years old and just graduated with a degree in business communications from a small college in Pennsylvania. If you had asked me 3 years ago whether I would end up moving back into my parents' old beige house in the suburbs of Pittsburgh after graduation, I would have laughed out loud. But life has a funny way of reminding you that not everything goes according to plan. I returned to my family's familiar beige house on a gloomy April afternoon, gripping the handle of my worn-out suitcase. In my mind, I kept telling myself this was only temporary. 3 months, maybe 4, and I'd save up enough for a deposit on a small apartment near downtown. I had already pictured it in my mind. Big windows filled with sunlight, a cozy kitchen, and quiet evenings with just me and a cup of hot tea. Thankfully, the job hunt didn't drag on like I feared. Within 2 weeks, I received an offer from Madison & Cole, a fast-growing marketing firm in downtown Pittsburgh. The starting salary wasn't sky-high, but it was good enough to make me feel secure. Plus, the quarterly performance bonuses sounded promising. If I did well, I could reach my goal of financial independence even faster. That night, I sat at the dinner table with my parents, my heart full of excitement. Mom was serving tomato meatballs, and Dad was flipping through an old newspaper. I couldn't hold it in any longer, so I announced happily, "I got the job at Madison & Cole, good salary, and there are quarterly bonuses too." The clinking of forks and knives stopped immediately before I even realized the shift in the air. Mom put down her fork, her eyes serious. "Are you planning to move out?" Her voice was calm but cold. I froze. The smile faded from my lips. "Yeah, probably in 3 or 4 months. I want to save a little more first, and then rent my own place." My parents exchanged a look. That all-too-familiar look that never meant anything good. Dad cleared his throat and started the same old speech. "Grace, you know your mother can only work part-time at the library because of her bad back and me." He hesitated. "There are rumors about layoffs at the plant." Mom chimed in, her voice dropping as if she were sharing something tragic. "We really need your help with the household expenses. Staying here rent-free would be easier for your job, too." "It just makes more sense, don't you think?" I looked down at the cooling meatballs on my plate, a heavy feeling settling in my chest. They weren't wrong, but another part of me, the part that longed for freedom, screamed in protest. In the end, I nodded and forced a smile. "I guess I can stay a little longer." And just like that, my new life began. I woke up early for work, contributed to the utility bills at night, and had dinner with my parents. At first it seemed fine. I kept telling myself I was doing the right thing, helping my family for a little while, and soon I'd have my own place. I kept convincing myself it was just temporary, that 3 months would fly by. But when the 4th month rolled around, I started realizing something was very wrong. One Friday evening, after a long, exhausting day of working on a new client campaign, I walked through the door only to find Mom waiting for me in the living room. A large envelope sat on the table in front of her, like it had been waiting all day. I hadn't even taken off my shoes when she spoke. Her voice was soft, but colder than the winter wind outside. "Grace, your father and I did some calculations with your current salary. You can afford to contribute more to the household expenses." I blinked, feeling a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" Dad walked out from the kitchen holding a water bill. His voice dropped. "Electricity, water, internet. Everything's going up. We can't keep covering it all by ourselves." I gripped the strap of my bag tighter. So the no-rent promise had been just sweet talk in the beginning. Now that I was getting settled in my job, they had everything lined up to make me pay more. "I already buy groceries every week," I said, trying to stay calm, "and I've been paying the electric bill since last month, too." Mom shook her head, giving me a sad little smile. "That's just a small part, Grace. At this point, we really need you to contribute a fixed amount every month. Think of it as sharing the family responsibility." I tightened my grip on my bag, my heart sinking. Every time I thought I was making progress, It felt like another invisible chain pulled me back. I only plan to stay for a few months, I reminded them. My voice cracked. I'm saving to move out. Dad crossed his arms, his expression hardening. Saving is good, but family is family. You can't turn your back when we need you. The phrase, family is family, echoed in my head like a sad, endless song. I nodded quietly, too drained to argue. I hurried upstairs, swallowing the lump in my throat. The days that followed felt like living under a thin layer of pressure, seeping into everything. Dinner wasn't light conversations anymore. It was a steady stream of subtle reminders about rising gas bills, roof repairs, and new expenses. This winter's really harsh, Mom would comment while holding up the heating bill. If someone could chip in a little more, it would make things so much easier. I ate my cold soup in silence, bitterness rising inside me. One Saturday afternoon, while I was at my desk, working on Madison and Cole's quarterly report, Mom knocked and entered with a stack of family health insurance papers. She smiled sweetly, but her words were razor sharp. Grace, we were thinking you could help with a small part of the insurance premiums. You know, health is everything. I looked up at her like I was seeing a stranger. Mom, I don't even have my own insurance yet. You're young and healthy, you'll be fine. She cut me off, her voice breezy, as if me carrying the entire family was perfectly natural. That night, lying in my old room, listening to the wind howl outside, I wondered when exactly I had turned into the family's walking wallet. My original plan, save for 3 months and move out, now felt as fragile as smoke, easily blown away by guilt trips, suggestive glances, and sharp words disguised as concern. I realized that if I stayed in this house, I would never be allowed to leave. I closed my eyes, the weight of an unformed decision pressing on my chest, but deep down, a tiny flame flickered. I knew I couldn't stay like this forever. I hadn't even mapped out my next move yet. But then, one Sunday afternoon, the front door swung open, and with the cold October breeze came something else. My sister, Lauren. Lauren, 8 years older than me, married to a man named Craig with 2 young kids. Ella, 5, and Mason, 3. She had lived 2 states away, but today she showed up unexpectedly with her whole family, laughter echoing through the hallway. I stood at the kitchen doorway, a glass of water in my hand, quietly observing. A part of me was already used to this, the way Mom lit up at the sight of Lauren, the way Dad abandoned his favorite sports broadcast to greet Craig at the door, the way the entire house seemed truly alive when Lauren was around. Only when Lauren was here did I feel like I was invisible. Grace, could you grab another glass for Craig? Mom said sweetly, without even glancing at me. I set my water glass down and silently fetched another one, like a shadow moving through the room. That night, I learned something new. It didn't matter that I was grown, that I had graduated with honors, or that I was shouldering a large part of the household expenses in my parents' eyes. I would always be the background to Lauren's spotlight. Throughout dinner, every conversation revolved around her. Mom couldn't stop asking about the new house Lauren and Craig had just bought, the private school they were considering for Ella, or the luxury Christmas vacation they were planning. Has Ella learned to read yet? My mom asked, eyes sparkling with pride. She's already reading children's books, Lauren beamed. And Mason is learning how to swim. He's doing great. That's wonderful, Mom exclaimed, turning to Dad, her face full of pride. Our daughter really is the best. No one asked me about my job at Madison and Cole. No one asked about the campaigns I had won, the nights I stayed up to meet deadlines. No one cared that I was trying, that I was building a life of my own. I cut my meatball into small pieces, chewing silently, barely tasting anything. After dinner, while I was washing the dishes, Lauren casually appeared behind me, leaning against the kitchen counter, sipping a glass of white wine. You're still living here, she chuckled, as if it was the most bizarre thing. Yeah, I replied shortly, scrubbing a plate under the hot water. You know, she said, living with your parents at this age is a little weird. She turned, and looked straight into my eyes. Her pale blue eyes, the same as Mom's. "I'm here to help them pay the bills," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Lauren shrugged and took another sip. "Well, someone had to do it. Lucky for them, they have you." Her smile was light, but every word felt like a needle pricking my chest. That night, sitting in my room, listening to Lauren and Craig laughing in the living room, I didn't even feel sad anymore. Just a cold numbness. I was never the first choice I had, never even been a choice in this house. I was nothing more than the backup, the unpaid help, the placeholder. When Lauren's spotlight dimmed even slightly, the thought crept into my mind clearer than ever. If I didn't save myself, no one would. Everything changed quickly. Just 2 weeks after Lauren and Craig temporarily moved in with my parents, claiming their new house was under renovation. I still remember that afternoon, vividly dragging myself up the porch steps after a long day at work, only to see their SUV parked out front, hearing the loud shrieks of the kids from the yard. "Mom," her face lit up like I'd never seen, greeted me at the door, Grace. "Thank goodness you're home. Ella and Mason are full of energy. Your father and I can't keep up." I hadn't even taken off my coat when Mason crashed into my legs, his hands sticky with chocolate, and Ella ran circles around the sofa with a marker in her hand. Lauren poked her head out from the kitchen, her golden hair tied up high, her face bright and carefree. "Sweetheart. Perfect timing. We were thinking of grabbing dinner out. You don't mind watching the kids for a few hours, do you?" I opened my mouth to protest, but Mom was quicker. Her voice was sweet as syrup. "You know your father and I aren't as spry anymore, Grace. You're the only one fast enough to keep up with them." I looked around at the messy house toys scattered everywhere, new stains on the carpet, and swallowed the lump in my throat. "Just a few hours," I muttered, convincing myself. But a few hours was never just a few hours. Dinner turned into drinks with friends, then coffee, then a late movie that night. I stayed up until nearly midnight, coaxing Mason to sleep, while Ella cried for her mom. The next day, when I tried to sit down with my parents to share how overwhelmed I felt, all I got were dismissive looks. "My back's killing me all night," Dad groaned, rubbing his hip. "I can't chase after the little ones anymore." Mom sighed sympathetically, mostly for herself, "And I had a headache all morning, Grace. Only someone young and strong like you can handle them." And so, an unspoken agreement was made. Grace was the default babysitter. I worked from 8 to 5, came home exhausted, and immediately became the unpaid nanny. On weekends, when my friends went on trips, attended festivals, or simply slept in, I juggled Mason's meals, Ella's coloring sessions, cleaning up the house before my parents' unannounced gatherings. Once I dared to ask for a weekend off, only to be met with a stunned look, as if I had just committed a grave offense. "You can't just think about yourself, Grace," Mom said, her voice heavy with guilt. "Lauren and Craig need some time together. The kids are little. Who else will care for them, if not you?" I stayed silent in this house. Every argument revolved around one thing: everyone else's needs. Mine simply didn't exist. Worse yet, Lauren began to treat my presence as a given. Every time I walked through the door after work, she was there waving a list of tasks. "Feed Mason, help Ella with preschool assignments, fold laundry, clean up toys. We've got date night," Lauren said once, applying lipstick in front of the living room mirror, while I bounced a crying Mason on my hip. "Someday you'll get it," she added. "This is good real-world experience for you." I clenched my jaw, feeling like I was being shackled to a life that wasn't mine. Every day, I felt myself sinking further, losing little pieces of myself. And deep down, a voice kept growing louder. "It's time to change, Grace. If you don't stand up, no one will." The news came on a cold Tuesday evening. As I walked through the door, Lauren sat at the kitchen table, clutching her phone, her face tense. Craig was pacing the living room, his hands running through his messy brown hair. Before I could ask what was happening, Mom appeared. Her voice choked, as if she had just been hit with a blow. "We need to talk." I unwrapped my scarf, my stomach dropping. "Craig just got the notice," Mom said, quickly wringing her hands. "His company went bankrupt. Lauren's family lost their main income." I looked at Lauren. She sat with her head bowed, her shoulders shaking slightly, one hand covering her face. I knew she was my sister, but I couldn't stop the unease curling inside me. "So, what's the plan now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom glanced at Dad, then back at me, her eyes full of desperate hope. "We're thinking they should move in here just temporarily until they get back on their feet." I froze. Our 4-bedroom house already felt cramped, and now 4 more people and the non-stop chaos of 2 small children. "What about my room?" I asked, my throat tightening. Mom didn't answer right away. Dad cleared his throat and said, "We've discussed it. Ella and Mason need a safe space to play and feel secure. We think you should give up your room." I swallowed hard. "You can move into the storage room," Mom said quickly, as if saying it fast would make it sound less insane. "Just for a little while. Grace, you're young, you'll adjust." I bit my lips so hard, I tasted blood. The storage room. That tiny space, barely big enough for a twin bed and a tiny desk. The place that had always been piled high with old Christmas decorations and boxes of newspapers Dad couldn't throw away. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask why my needs were always the first to be sacrificed. But instead, I just nodded stiffly and went upstairs, feeling like someone had snatched away my life yet again. That weekend, I cleaned out the storage room. Every time I hauled another box away, a part of me went numb. My bedroom, my sanctuary for years, was repainted in soft pastels, carpeted, and filled with toys. The day Lauren and Craig officially moved in the house turned into a chaotic beehive. Ella and Mason ran wild, shouting through the hallways. Lauren directed the furniture like a queen, orchestrating her court, while Craig fumbled with Mason's crib in the dining room. Mom couldn't stop gushing over the kids. Dad brewed coffee for Craig like he was some kind of honored guest. And me? I vanished into my new room, struggling to hold back tears as I rebuilt my flimsy twin bed that night. After things calmed down, I went to the kitchen, looking for something to eat. There was a plate of cold cookies on the table, and the living room echoed with the sounds of a cartoon Ella was watching. Mom caught sight of me and said quickly, "Grace, can you watch Ella and Mason tomorrow? Lauren and Craig have some paperwork to take care of." I froze. "I have work," I reminded her, my voice raspy just in the evening. She was already clearing plates. "Just a few hours? You're young. You can handle it." I barely remember how I made it back to my tiny room that night. All I know is that as I lay there listening to Ella's laughter, Craig's loud phone conversations, and Mom softly reassuring Lauren that everything would be okay, I realized I had nothing left but this cramped space and a loneliness that seemed to fill every breath. It didn't take long to understand that Lauren and Craig moving in was just the beginning of a real nightmare. My days now started with Mason screaming at 6 in the morning. Ella pounded on my door every chance she got. I hadn't even opened my eyes before the house thundered with footsteps, clattering toys, and blaring cartoons. Hiding in my tiny room before work barely bought me 10 minutes of peace. Mason would often sneak in, smearing crayon marks or cookie crumbs all over my paperwork. Once I spent an entire night scraping crayon stains off a client contract due. The next morning, Lauren and Craig lived like they were on vacation. Lauren spent most of her time scrolling through social media or chatting with friends. Craig parked himself at the kitchen table, claiming to job hunt, but mostly playing games. My parents, they were thrilled with the chaos whenever I mentioned the noise or the mess. Mom would chuckle. "They're just kids. Let them be free." Dad would nod along like the noise and disorder were proof of a happy family. After work, I dragged myself home only to be thrown into the same endless cycle. Babysitting, cooking, cleaning. It became a frantic juggle. Cutting Mason's food, mopping up Ella's spilled juice, forcing down my own cold leftovers. Still, the bills started skyrocketing. The first time I looked at the new electric bill, I had to reread it 3 times. It was nearly double what it had been, and it all fell on me. Lauren and Craig weren't financially stable, and my parents lived on limited pensions. When I brought it up one Thursday night at dinner, my hands shook despite trying to stay calm. "We need to talk about the bills," I said, laying the electric bill on the table. "I can't keep covering everything by myself." Lauren looked up from her phone, frowning. "Grace, bringing up money right now is really insensitive." Mom immediately chimed in, her voice full of reproach. "You know, Lauren and Craig are struggling. Family is supposed to support each other, not nickel and dime everything." I clenched my fists under the table, my chest tight. "And who's supporting me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I'm working full-time too. I need to save for my own future," Craig snorted, muttering. "What future does a single girl even need to save for later this year?" It felt like a slap to the face. I stood up my chair, screeching against the floor. "I get it," I said coldly, gathering the bill into my hands. "I'll handle my part. The rest, figure it out yourselves." I turned and walked back toward the storage room, the sound of laughter and murmured comments behind me like 1,000 tiny knives. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake on the small bed, listening to footsteps running wild down the hallway, the late-night TV blaring downstairs, and my mother murmuring about how Lauren handles family pressure so well in the darkness. One thought blazed clearly in my mind. I couldn't keep living like this. If I stayed any longer, I would lose whatever was left of myself. For the first time in months, I sat up, opened my laptop, and started searching for apartments. I didn't know where I was going yet, but one thing was certain. I was leaving, and this time, I wasn't looking back. Saturday morning, just as I finished making my coffee, Mom appeared in the kitchen holding a thick stack of bills. She dropped it on the table with a heavy thud, as if she wanted the whole world to hear Grace. "We need to talk about the electricity, water, internet, and grocery bills," she began, her expression serious. I set my coffee down, my heart sinking. I knew this conversation wouldn't end well. "Everything's gotten more expensive." Mom continued, her voice tinged with reproach. "There are more people living here now. Of course, expenses are higher." I nodded, trying to stay calm. "That's why I said slowly, that everyone should share the living costs fairly. Each family should apportion me a portion. That way, it's easier for everyone." The kitchen fell into sudden silence. Lauren came down the stairs, her hair neat, her face fresh, as if nothing was wrong. Overhearing the conversation, she let out a dry laugh that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, Grace," Lauren said, her voice sugary sweet but dripping with sarcasm. "Are you really going to nickel and dime your own family?" Craig called out from the living room, throwing in another jab that made my blood boil. "We're struggling right now, and you still have the heart to bring this up?" Dad shook his head, sighing like I was the most ungrateful child in America. "Family means sacrifice, Grace. You can't always think about dollars and cents." Mom delivered the final blow, her voice firm as a gavel. "If you're not willing to help when the family's struggling, what kind of family member are you?" I bit my lip hard, swallowing. All the arguments stuck in my throat. Any reason I gave would just be crushed under the ungrateful label they were eager to slap on me. I turned away, feeling my heart being squeezed tight. The coffee in my hand had gone cold, just like the numbness spreading through me from that day on. My resentment wasn't just a quiet simmer anymore. It became a storm, growing bigger and stronger every day. Lauren and Craig kept using me as their free weekend nanny. Every Friday afternoon, I'd get a text from Lauren, something like Craig and I have plans. Tomorrow night, you'll watch Ella and Mason, right? Thanks. Love, as if it was a given. Not even worth asking. My parents kept using their health as an excuse. Anytime I hinted that maybe they should help, Dad would say, "I've got a headache." Mom would add, "My back's acting up. We're getting old." Grace, the same broken record over and over. Meanwhile, I was stuck in a never-ending loop. Work, pay bills, babysit, clean. One time I dared to say no. A simple text, "I'm busy this weekend, can't babysit." Within minutes, my phone blew up with missed calls and guilt-trip messages from Mom, Dad, and Lauren, all with the same accusatory tone. "You're letting the family down. Your sister has been through so much. Only selfish people turn their backs on family in tough times." Every word felt like a dagger to my pride. At this time, instead of feeling guilty, I just felt empty. Sunday night, as I cleaned up toys scattered across the living room, Lauren strolled in with a smoothie in hand. "Craig and I are going to look at model homes tomorrow morning," she said casually, "so you'll need to watch the kids again." I froze, looking at her, feeling nothing but ice inside. "You do realize," I said, my words sharp as stone, "that I have a life too." Lauren shrugged and smiled coldly. "Oh, Grace, you live with your parents and work a desk job. What could you possibly be so busy with?" I stood up straight, staring directly into her eyes. For the first time in months, I felt no fear, no hesitation. "Just wait," I said softly. "You'll find out soon enough." I turned and walked away, leaving behind Lauren's annoyed, confused face. Inside me, a plan was forming, and this time, I swore no one was going to crush my dreams again. I sat curled up in the cramped storage room, the dim light from an old desk lamp casting uneven shadows on the walls. In my hands was a text from Rachel, my best friend from college. "Grace, we're planning a ski trip to Blue Ridge Mountain this weekend. Come with us. You need a break from that madhouse." I stared at the screen, torn. Part of me wanted to say no, like always, claim I was too busy, had family obligations, or just fear. But this time, a fierce need flooded through me. I had to get out. I had to breathe. I had to remind myself that another life existed beyond this endless cycle of bills, babysitting, and cleaning. I typed back, "I'm in. Save me a spot." Just then, I heard a knock at the door. Lauren peeked in, her perfect golden hair tied up neatly, her smile bright like she had never known hardship. "Craig and I got invited to Uncle Gene's birthday party downtown this Saturday. Mom and Dad are coming too. You'll watch Ella and Mason, right?" I looked up, my voice calmer than I expected. "Sorry, I won't be home this weekend." Lauren frowned, not understanding. "What, I'm going skiing with my friends?" I repeated, emphasizing every word. The air in the room seemed to freeze. "You are kidding," Lauren barked a sharp laugh. "Grace, this is a family thing." "No, I'm not kidding," I said, standing up, feeling a new strength rush through me. "I have a right to live my own life. I'm not your free babysitter anymore." Within minutes, shouting echoed downstairs. "My parents!" Craig, all chiming in, a chaotic choir of outrage. "You are abandoning your family for a ski trip, Grace." Mom shrieked, "I can't believe how irresponsible you're being." Dad growled. "We trusted you, and you betrayed that trust." Craig chimed in, as if he had the most right to speak. "You're abandoning your family." "Grace, this is unbelievable." Lauren pointed her finger straight at me, her voice shaking with anger. "If you walk out of this house this weekend, don't ever come back." Her words hit me like a hammer to the chest, but instead of collapsing like they expected, I simply smiled. The first truly free smile I had in months. "Don't worry," I said coldly. I'm leaving and I have no intention of coming back." They stood frozen, as if they couldn't believe what they'd just heard. But I didn't give them a chance to react. I turned, went upstairs, and started packing. Not much, just a few sets of clothes, my laptop, personal documents, the rest. I was ready to leave behind without a second thought. I heard my mother's wailing from downstairs, my father's shouting, Lauren's furious voice, all swirling together like a storm behind me. But I didn't look back, not once. Just a few hours later, I was behind the wheel of my old car, driving straight out of the street I had grown up on, leaving behind the suffocating walls, and the people who only knew how to demand, but never how to understand. That night, I slept on Rachel's small couch, in her cozy apartment filled with laughter. For the first time in a very long time, I could breathe air that wasn't heavy with resentment or expectations. The next morning, I woke up on Rachel's couch, the weak winter sunlight filtering through the curtains. In my mind was a strange sense of relief, a feeling I had forgotten for months. Rachel handed me a hot cup of coffee. "Grace, are you sure?" she asked, her eyes full of worry and pride. I smiled, more certain than ever. "I'm sure." That very afternoon, I went back to the old house, not to apologize, not to negotiate, but to end it all. The whole family seemed to be waiting. Mom sat in the living room, her face cold like ice. Dad had his arms crossed, disappointment playing on his face. Lauren stood next to Craig, lips pressed tight while the kids played with toys on the floor, blissfully unaware of the storm about to hit. I took a deep breath and stepped into the center of the room. "I'm here to pick up the rest of my things," I said calmly, "to let you know that starting today I no longer live here. I'm not paying any more living expenses either." The air grew sick, like the room had been drained of oxygen. Mom jumped up, her face pale. "Grace, you can't do this. Families don't abandon each other." I looked straight into her eyes, unblinking. "No, Mom! Real families don't exploit each other like this." Dad slammed his hand on the armrest, his voice booming. "You're only thinking about yourself." I swallowed the anger rising inside me and replied with strange calmness. "I've been thinking about everyone else for years. Now it's time to think about myself." Lauren scoffed, crossing her arms. "Wait until you need help. Don't expect any of us to be there for you." I turned to her, the smile on my lips free of bitterness. "I don't need a family that only knows how to demand, but never once asks if I'm okay." No one said a word. I quietly went upstairs and gathered the last of my belongings. One small suitcase, a few favorite books, my laptop, and my favorite coat. That was it. Everything else, the half-hearted gifts, the bitter memories I left behind without regret. As I dragged my suitcase down the stairs, Mom rushed toward me, grabbing my arm. Desperation in her eyes. "Grace, please think it over. You'll regret this." I gently freed my arm from her grip and whispered, "No, Mom. I'd regret staying." I opened the door. The biting January air slapped my face, waking every nerve in my body. I pulled my suitcase across the threshold, stepping outside, letting the old wooden door close behind me, like the final period on a long, painful chapter. Driving back to Rachel's small apartment, my phone buzzed non-stop with calls and texts. I didn't even need to read them to know what they said. Rachel welcomed me with a warm smile and a tight hug. "Welcome back to the world where people love themselves," she whispered. That night, sitting on the tiny balcony, wrapped in a fluffy blanket, sipping hot cocoa, I felt truly alive for the first time in years. No more accusations, no more crushing pressure, just sweet, peaceful silence, like a winter night without wind. 3 days later, I signed the lease for my very first apartment, a small, bright place just 15 minutes from work. It wasn't perfect. The walls had a few cracks, the floors were old, and the heater made a low humming noise. To me, it felt like an entire kingdom of freedom. I laid fresh sheets on the bed, stacked my books on a shelf, hung a landscape photo on the wall, and when I finished, I stood in the center of the room, overwhelmed with indescribable joy. This was where I would start again. The first few days in my new apartment felt like a dream I once thought I could never have. Every morning, I woke up to sunlight pouring into my room, made myself a hot coffee, and sat in the armchair by the window, soaking in the absolute peace. No crying, kids, no blaring TV, no one calling my name with endless demands. Just me, my little space, and complete tranquility. My bank account began to change too. No more covering electricity, water, and internet bills for an entire household. My paycheck was now enough for rent, personal expenses, and even savings. For the first time in years, I could afford little luxuries, a new book, a dinner at my favorite Italian restaurant, a weekend trip to the beach. I signed up for a yoga class nearby, made new friends, and slowly built a life I never thought I could have. A life not suffocated by expectations and unreasonable demands. But of course, my family didn't let go easily. The first message came on a Sunday night, just as I put my feet up and got ready to watch my favorite movie. Mom texted Grace your father, and I need to talk. The family can't stay divided like this. Then Lauren. Do you know the kids keep asking about you? Don't you feel guilty? Craig wasn't far behind. At the very least, you should be grateful to the people who raised you. The messages flooded in like a rising tide. When I didn't respond, the calls started first Mom, then Dad, then Lauren, each taking turns. I held my phone, watching it light up and go dark again and again, feeling no guilt anymore. Instead, a cold, steady calm filled me. I was too familiar with this emotional manipulation. Sweet words laced with threats, fake tears mixed with accusations. I took a deep breath. Then one by one, I blocked every number: Mom, Dad, Lauren, Craig. Then I opened my social media accounts and cut ties with anyone who could act as a bridge for their complaints and guilt trips to find their way back to me. It wasn't easy. My hand trembled slightly as I pressed the block button. But once it was done, I sank into the chair, feeling as if I had just taken off a heavy suit of armor that had clung to me for years. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of relief. The phone was silent. No more demanding texts, no more guilt-tripping calls. I sat by the window, sipping my coffee, watching the bare trees on the street. A small smile spread across my lips. I had chosen myself, and I didn't regret it. That afternoon, after work, I stopped by a small bookstore. On my way home, I bought a new notebook, soft blue leather cover, and a beautifully crafted fountain pen. That night, I sat at my desk, opened to the first page, and wrote, "My new chapter begins here." I knew there would be lonely moments. There would be nights when doubt or longing crept in. But I also knew that whatever came, I would face it with a free heart. My new life gradually grew more stable day by day, and I began to learn how to listen to myself instead of the voices of others. Each morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, my heart filled with hope. I learned to savor the small things. A fragrant cup of tea, a favorite song playing while cooking a lazy afternoon walk around the park near my apartment. These joys had once been buried under the shouts, the frowns, and the endless demands. I slowly realized that I didn't need permission to live the life I wanted. I no longer had to prove my worth, by sacrificing for people who had never truly valued me. I thought back to the years I spent pushing myself, working overtime to pay bills, sacrificing precious weekends to babysit, carrying responsibilities that were never mine to begin with. All that time, I believed that if I worked hard enough, loved deep enough, I would eventually be recognized. But the truth was, my kindness only made others feel entitled. One late night, while jotting notes in my new notebook, I wrote a sentence, one word at a time, like a promise to myself. I deserve to be loved, respected, and free to choose my own life. I realized that love isn't blind sacrifice. It's not giving up yourself for scraps of affection. True love is about uplifting, sharing, and mutual respect. Things I had never received in my old home. From then on, I started setting clear boundaries. I learned how to say no to unreasonable demands without feeling guilty for putting myself first. I spent time building my career, taking soft skills classes, and even signing up for a weekend cooking course. Something I had never dared to do before, because I was always giving my time away to others. Weekends were no longer spent staggering from exhaustion, but became precious moments of true enjoyment. Short road trips, coffee dates with friends, cozy evenings reading under the warm glow of a lamp. I reconnected with old friends, the ones I had forgotten while caught up in my family's chaos. Genuine friendships, unjudged conversations, bursts of carefree laughter. They were like medicine, reviving my spirit. One spring afternoon, sitting in my favorite little cafe, I realized I no longer felt any need to go back. No more longing for approval. No more waiting for an apology or a reconciliatory hug. I had found peace within myself. My family still occasionally tried to reach out, but this time, I didn't feel pulled back into the old cycle of guilt and duty. I could smile calmly at their attempts, because I knew I had stepped out of that shadow for good. I chose my life, a life that was free, full, and overflowing with love. Love for myself first. My story is a powerful reminder that everyone deserves to live their own life, not to be a shadow in someone else's. When I found the courage to let go of burdens that weren't mine, I finally experienced true freedom and happiness. Life was no longer about silent sacrifices, but about building my own value and dreams. Sometimes, to find the light, you have to be brave enough to leave even the most familiar places behind. I did it. What do you think about Grace's journey? Was she right to walk away and reclaim herself? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and inspiring family stories.